So, this takes place back in 2005, while serving at the U.S. Embassy in the Ivory Coast, West Africa. One morning after working my night shift at the embassy, I returned home to the Marine House. The U.S. Marines lived in a local residence bought and paid for by the U.S. Embassy. It was a 3-story home in what locals would consider an upscale neighborhood, by Ivorian standards. The home was fairly large and had a pool, gym, laundry room, and driver's room on the first floor. It housed 5 U.S. Marines who were tasked with protecting the U.S. Embassy and its personnel. On this morning, I was pretty tired. I had just arrived in the country and was still getting used to the night shift work. Lots of Red Bulls. I walked up to my room on the 3rd story of the house. It was a relatively medium-sized room with an attached bathroom and one large window fitted with heavy curtains to keep the daylight out during the day so we could sleep. I was crashing hard from all the Red Bulls. I managed to take off my uniform and get straight into bed. It wasn't long before I reached that state of mind where you're half asleep and half awake. I believe I was at the point where I started dreaming when some sort of sixth sense told me, "You have to wake up." I remember opening my eyes and staring at the opposite wall at the foot of my bed. The room was dark, and I was still half asleep as I scanned from the left side of my room to the right. I recall my eyes concentrating on the daylight that was shooting down the side of the wall towards the corners of my room. As my eyes reached the far right corner, I stopped and focused on a dark spot in the corner of the room. I couldn't make out what it was, but the light abruptly stopped before hitting the corner. As I stared at this dark spot, I realized it was a silhouette of a person. It was tall, and I could make out the outline of shoulders and a head. My first instinct was that I was dreaming, but after a few seconds, my vision cleared up and the silhouette was still standing there. As I focused harder on it, I realized it wasn't disappearing, and the realization that something was standing there hit me. I had a quick flash thought of, "What the fuck is that?" When all of a sudden, this shadow figure with red eyes, which I could now see clearly, rushed forward and started choking me. Still to this day, I remember the grip it had and the flash of heat I felt run down the back of my neck all the way down to my feet. I closed my eyes tightly and was paralyzed. I couldn't move. The level of fear that struck me was immense. After about 10 seconds, I felt this grip letting go, and as soon as I could move, my first action was to reach for my K-bar knife that I kept on top of my nightstand. I quickly stood up, ready to stab whatever the hell was in my room. The next couple of seconds were me tearing my curtains open and clearing the room and bathroom, yelling, "Jesus Christ!" My room was completely empty. I went from attack mode to quickly trying to convince myself it was just the side effect of this medication I was on. One of the cons of working in an African post was that we were ordered to take mefloquine, an anti-malaria medication, by our command. One of the side effects clearly stated was the possibility of night terrors. Regardless, I couldn't stay in that room. I ended up falling asleep in the common area with the TV turned on. Fast forward 5 months, and we, the Marines, moved out of that home and into the new embassy compound that had just been constructed. Another Marine and I decided to have a movie night and watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which was a creepy movie. When it was done, I walked into the kitchen and ran into Sammy, our butler. Sammy was in charge of doing our laundry and prepping our meals throughout the week. He was amazing. When he wasn't working for us, he spent his time as a Catholic priest at a local Catholic church. Having the movie fresh in my mind, I asked him, "Sammy, if we got possessed by the devil, could you perform an exorcism?" "Of course, sir. I do them quite often. Many bad spirits here in Côte d'Ivoire." "Seriously, Sammy?" "Yes, sir. Many evils here." "When we moved in, did you bless our new house?" Yes, of course, sir. This is a very good home. Sammy hesitated. But not like the old house. That was a very bad house. Instantly, I went cold and asked him to explain. The old house was possessed by 3 demonic spirits. He then went on to tell me that one morning, while he was doing our laundry in the basement of our old home, he looked into the marine gym and saw 3 shadow figures with red eyes standing side by side in the corner of the room. He grabbed his crucifix and began to pray before they vanished. He then instructed me to go speak with Joey, one of our Ivorian marine drivers. I hauled ass to find Joey. Joey was a 49-year-old father of 8 who had worked for 15 years as the embassy marine driver. Joey told me that one night, after dropping off one of the Marines, he returned to the driver's room where he tried to get some sleep. He was awakened by something whispering his name. When he opened his eyes, something grabbed him and started choking him. He said he swung his arms wildly, but couldn't hit the thing that was choking him. When it finally released him, he ran out of the driver's room, hopped into the armored suburban marine vehicle, and drove to the U.S. Embassy, where he remained for the rest of the night. He never again stepped foot in the driver's room. He told me that sometime later, our gardener accidentally dug up a juju box with bones and voodoo witchcraft trinkets inside. Apparently, somebody had cursed the property, according to him. As if the story couldn't get weirder, I headed inside the U.S. Embassy later that day to speak with my gunnery sergeant about some work. Our conversation turned to what I had just learned about our old house. Gunny had this look on his face. He reached up to his logbooks, pulled out an incident report binder from a few years prior, and pulled out a report where a former Marine at the post had reported an intruder in his room that had choked him and disappeared. He slept in the room I slept in. The Marine was convinced it happened to the point that an official U.S. Embassy report had to be filed.